Who dat to you and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Who Dat Confessional Podcast, episode 750. We'll get 1,000 at some point. We'll just have to start breaking this thing down by season. Welcome in. Today we got one topic to talk about, and that's it. No more topics for y'all. You get one. Uno. I guess we can technically talk about two. But we're going to talk about the signing of Chase Young to the roster. I know there are several people excited, several people indifferent, and several people who aren't very happy about that one. Chase Young joining the roster. Personally, I like the move, but I have reasons to have negative comments, and I'm going to have a couple of negative comments about the fact that the man already is having neck surgery. Hey, who dat? It is a New Orleans Saints defensive end if I ever seen one. Go ahead and give that man Marcus Davenport's locker. But before we get started, as we always do, we give a shout out to those who are here in the chat early on, those who arrive first. Early birds get the worm and early birds get the podcast shout outs. Who Dat 2, Abraham, Rainey, Brian W. the Second, Josh Chantel, DeAndre Bailey, Charles Como Jr., Nick 504, Mr. Jerry, good to see you in the house, Z Poppy, Mac Tizino, Jermaine Roland, James Griffon, Lance Lang, Mr. TJ, and everybody else. Who Dat to you. God bless. Welcome in to the channel tonight. So, we have signed Chase Young on a short deal worth up to $13 million. Now, there are several factors about this Chase Young contract that have come out that I really want to highlight before we get too deep into it. And I'm even going to bust out a little bit of tape. Now, TJ, if you have time to help me, you can clip some of the tape that we're going to have here on the live stream, and I may put it into a video if you want to help out. But we're going to talk about Chase Young. Important to talk about his contract a little bit first, and what it can mean for this team. I do want to point out some nice things about the contract. Number one, according to Nick Underhill with New Orleans Football, they have written in certain preventative measures for injuries. So even though he's $13 million, he's getting a fully guaranteed $13 million, it's technically not guaranteed because if he doesn't play games, if he doesn't hit certain marks, he's not going to get all the money. So there are incentives and protections for the New Orleans Saints with this 1 year, $13 million contract for Chase Young. And in a lot of ways, he reminds me a lot. Peyton Turner and Marcus Davenport. And what I mean by that is he was picked second overall. When you watch the tape, you see a guy who needs a lot of technique work. And there's been comments made before about him maybe being lazy on certain plays, and I just honestly think that he doesn't really know his role that well, and he needs a lot of coaching. Now, obviously, Clint Kubiak's been able to get a little bit of an eye on him himself, if y'all don't remember how, because in the middle of last season, Chase Young was traded to the San Francisco 49ers, and he went from being a guy who played about 90% of the snaps with Washington, I think it's at Chicago, with Washington, to playing about 50% of the snaps with San Francisco. So he definitely saw a reduction with a deeper defensive line over there. Then they opted not to keep him. But coming in this year, he is going to hopefully be healthy. That's the key, number one, and hopefully contribute. He did contribute in the playoff runs with San Francisco. Obviously, they didn't win the Super Bowl, but he did record a sack, if y'all remember, in that Kansas City Super Bowl. So that's something. You did get to see several different bits and pieces of him at various points. He also did a little bit of special teams here and there. But the $13 million, one, I think is an okay contract for modern times. So maybe a little bit high, but it's also 1 year and it has injury preventors in it. So it keeps the New Orleans Saints safe on paper. The other part of this that I don't mind at all is the fact that the New Orleans Saints don't need him to be a 100% starter. What I envision and see Chase Young being, and this is just my opinion, based off watching how DA works, is he's going to be a rotational piece. He's going to split time with Carl Granderson, and he's going to get used on third down pass situations with Cameron Jordan coming off the field. Or potentially sliding Cam in for a NASCAR package, with a NASCAR package looking something like Carl Granderson, Chase Young, Cameron Jordan, and then Brian Brzee. Either way, all of this spells good, potentially great for New Orleans. Also don't want to forget Isaiah Foskey. He's in the rotation as well. Now, this is a former second overall pick. I mean, this is a big name and a big deal, but I feel like New Orleans is getting the best chance to potentially utilize this. Keep in mind that last year, the New Orleans Saints had a 32% pass rush win rate. That's according to ESPN Analytics. 32% pass rush win rate, which was the second worst in the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys had a pass rush win rate of 59%. Those were the ones that were the best. So clearly Nolan needed to improve in an area in terms of pass rusher. I think they've done that with this signing, but doesn't mean there's any guarantees here. You've definitely got to make sure that it works out. This neck injury, he's going to have surgery on. If y'all haven't heard the news, he will be having surgery, but New Orleans knew about this before the signing. And this is supposed to sideline him all the way into training camp, though you'll still probably see him in the preseason. He's having a procedure due to a stinger he had during last year. Now, he played through this. It should be pointed out that he played through this injury, this neck injury, throughout the entire year, all the way through the Super Bowl. Okay? So it's not like he just got injured back in like March or February, goofing off, playing 2K. He actually played an entire season with the injury. So the level of severity is not that high, and hopefully he's able to contribute to some degree here this season. Now, we'll see how it plays out. If you're a New Orleans Saints fan, you're clearly worried about him not playing at all. Thankfully, though, they signed a big name without a big deal, and for that, I give love and credit to Mickey Loomis and company. I am really happy about that move. That doesn't mean I think that this is a, signing that moves New Orleans' needle that much, but I do think it's an opportunity for them to potentially find their future. It's low risk. I know $13 million sounds like a lot, but grand scheme, I don't think it's that much. We can go over defensive end contracts, though. Not a problem. We can go over where this places him across the league. And truthfully, if you want to go by yearly value, well, it's actually kind of low. In fact, you have to go all the way below Cameron Jordan to find him. And it's the same yearly average amount as Carl Granderson. So when you put it in that context, personally, I start to look at that and go, okay, pretty good value. Robert Quinn makes more per year. Zach Allen, Eric Armstead, Draymond Jones, Jonathan Greenard, who just got signed, Von Miller, Trey Hendrickson, Leonard Williams, Max Crosby, Montez Sweat, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa. Some of these guys making 2 or 3 times Chase Young is. Chase Young's yearly average is quite literally Carl Granderson's contract, but a 1-year deal with injury preventative measures in place. So the contract I have no real issue with. It is a, hey, you have immense potential. Can you put it on the field? And it's not even a big gamble. Like, this is not one of those things that hurts the New Orleans long term. There's no dead cap next year. There's no void years. It's just a straight 1-year contract that can make him $13 million if he plays and if he contributes. And I think that is a good thing. It's one of those that, like, even if you were a detractor, Chase Young, you love this style of signing. 1 year, prove it, and if he proves it, then you make the deal. Joseph says, do you think from this signing they'll still look for pass rusher in the draft or look for BPA? So Joseph, I think what New Orleans has always tried to do, at least over the past 2 decades, is they want to draft BPA. They want to draft the best player available regardless of position that fits this team, which still could be a pass rusher, FYI. But I do think they're doing the same thing that we saw them do last year. If you remember last offseason, what did they want to do? They wanted to fill every position of need in free agency and then go into the draft taking whoever or whatever is the best potential choice for the team, regardless of position. That's exactly what they did. To me, that's what good teams do. You look for teams to do this. In fact, I would argue that the best teams in the NFL when it comes to drafting do BPA, period. So 1-year contract on Chase Young. I do want to show y'all a couple of plays. We don't typically do this a ton on the live stream, but I want to. So for those who listen afterwards, don't worry. I will describe what we're going to discuss, and we will, of course, hopefully enjoy. So this is going to be from week 7. We're looking at a play from week 7 against the New York Giants. This is with the Washington Commanders. Shout out to Tyrod Taylor. So you're going to see Chase Young lined up in a wide 9 over on what is commonly seen as the weak side of the defensive line, or the side that Carl Granderson plays. Now, on this play, you're going to get to see him utilize some good athleticism. I do note right here, if you are watching live, a little bit of a false step, but that's okay. Nice, powerful rip move underneath, and simply does a great job to level his hips. He gets horizontal at the line. So as soon as he hits his break, rip underneath, flatten out, go straight in. Good play. And you see a lot of this. Now, you're going to see a lot of inconsistency and mixed bag from this player. But you also see something that not a lot of guys are going to do, which is simply have the ability to immediately win because he's physically better. Does that sound familiar? I know many Saints fans are going to get very hesitant hearing about this type of a player. But when you talk about what Dennis Allen wants from a defensive end, this is literally what he wants. He wants a guy who's a physical phenom, who can come from a wide 9 and then immediately break parallel to the line of scrimmage, flatten out, and get to the quarterback. He wants that type of big body pass rusher who also will not fall or play action, who will defend as the end man on the line of scrimmage. Chase Young checks all the height, weight, speed boxes of the prototype that Dennis Allen looks for on this defense. And these are the type of plays that you're hoping to see. Coming through with not the best technique, but simply winning with physical power. Again, watch it one more time live. You're going to notice that left foot, a little bit of a false step, whatever. Rip through here. Not the strongest rip or anything, but simply overwhelms the offensive lineman. And that's a lot of what you see from Chase Young on his successful plays. You're also going to see plays that don't have the same level of impact. He is not a very good twist stunt runner. And when he loses his initial move, he doesn't seem to know exactly what to do the next rep. As in, if I don't win, well, what exactly did I do here? And the example is a play that I just showed there, which was a twist stunt where you don't see him having that same level of engagement that you're used to from a New Orleans Saints defender. We've seen the New Orleans Saints have very well techniqued twist stunt games, multiple move sets, even from Carl Granderson, doing everything from the ghost move to chop swaps, all these things that hopefully Brian Young, their pass rush specialist, who Cameron Jordan is always praising, can do well with. Chase Young can play with a high motor, but the problem is I don't see him always playing with a high motor. Chase Young has very good hands and feet when he's actually using good hands and feet. The thing with him has always been inconsistency. And I think a lot of inconsistency comes down to coaching. Coaching will make a player great, or coaching will let a player whittle around and just be whatever. And I think that the New Orleans Saints are a great position for Chase Young because they allow him to have the opportunity to come here and not have to be perfect, but still give him the opportunity to become perfect. As in, you have your starting defensive ends, both of them, but there's still a good, I would say 30 to 40% of the snaps that you can have him on the field. And I think that that also drives him to be better. And again, it comes down to, why do you see inconsistency in the motor? And I think inconsistency in the motor comes from him simply not knowing what he needs to do or not being proficient. And you can tell that there are just plays that he's not very confident in himself. Whereas if he has a singular role, as in you're going to rush this attack and make this move, he does well. If he doesn't have that role, or he doesn't have that and he has to figure things out, well, things don't tend to go his way. And then you see like this look of confusion. It's almost like you're seeing a hesitation on the field is the best way I can describe it. But there are really good plays with him, and I want to show you a couple of those. This isn't a highlight reel because we are talking about some of the negatives that he can have, but let me show you another one from that same game in week 7. So similar to what you just saw, is in a 2-point stance here in the wide 9. I want you to watch as the cross comes. It's a great job to take on contact. And then as he's reading the quarterback, because he's only got one role here, he's an upfield rusher. As he's reading the quarterback, number one, takes the hit. He misses there. He does not get hands on first, so it rocks him. But he's strong, upholds, still manages to run the arc, and they got hands up in the throwing lane. These are the type of plays that if you can get consistency out of, then you have a good player. So overall, I think the New Orleans Saints got a low-risk, high-potential reward signing, and you have a great pass rush specialist coach, according to the New Orleans Saints defensive lineman, well, mainly Cameron Jordan. Cameron Jordan, who I'm quoting the most on that one, and Johnson, and you see what you can develop into. Carl Granderson's a great example, in my opinion. Carl Granderson is a purely homegrown talent who became an elite pass rusher. Trey Hendrickson, under the same pass rush specialist that I'm speaking of, by the way, did the same thing. Because Brian Young's been here like 15 years. He's one of the few guys who's been here for forever through like what, 3 defensive coordinators. Brian Young, 4 defensive coordinators. Brian Young has been here to help with the pass rush. So we've seen that the New Orleans Saints have got guys that they can develop pass rush with. The key is, can they do that with Chase Young? And if they can't, well, then again, the worst thing that happens is you signed a deal for 1 year that you had the money for that turns into nothing. And that's it. Like, that's all. Like, literally the worst thing that happens here is New Orleans signed a 1-year contract that goes nowhere. And if that's the case, it's a win-win for New Orleans. Because again, they're going to clear up money, right? Like, they're going to make the moves they make. They're going to sign their pick. This one addresses a huge need. Again, this was the 31st team in the NFL in terms of pass rush win rate, which is an advanced analytic through ESPN. Well, this addresses that. We'll see if it shows off. He says, show the playoff game versus Detroit where he was getting cracked left and right by wide receivers. Yeah, I mean, he definitely has. And again, this goes back to why I think it's a technique thing. Because his peripheral understanding or situational awareness of the ball, spatial awareness, all those are things that need improvement. In fact, you can actually see this when pulling guards come his way and things like that. Head on the swivel. He is not a guy. Let's word it this way. If you were the team that drafted Chase Young, you're very disappointed in your investment, right? You're very disappointed. But I know, and I'm going to use this name because you're familiar with it, but is Minnesota unhappy with their attempted investment in Marcus Davenport? And no, they're not. Why are they not? Well, he got injured, couldn't play, so they went ahead and let him go. He's going to Detroit. But they did the same thing that we're doing with Chase Young. They signed him to a 1-year deal and said, if you can be healthy and if you can play on the field, have at it. We're going to be excited. We'll give you a long-term deal. Well, Davenport managed to play 3 starts, got 2 sacks, injured, season done, they moved on. If you can pick up a guy who physically has high-end talent and you can make it work, you win big. The only people that should be upset are the people who couldn't make it work when they spent high capital, like drafting him 2nd overall, which is what the Washington Commanders did back in 2020. They're the losers here. The New Orleans Saints can only win because it hurts them, and there's no way this hurts them. And it can only become something good or something neutral. And for one of the rare times, I'm actually going, yay, good job, Saints, on a signing, because so often it feels like you can potentially get burned by what they're doing. And the Willie Gay signing, I feel like, is great depth. The Chase Young signing is fantastic depth. They also went and re-signed Ugo Amadi. Shout out to Ugo Amadi for coming back to the New Orleans Saints. So they have made quietly, in my opinion, really good depth moves. Doesn't mean that the New Orleans Saints are perfect. There's still some things that I think that need to get addressed, including the offensive line. The Tennessee Titans, by the way, Titans Twitter has been quote tweeting so many of my Andres Pete clips from last year on Twitter because there's a potential that he signs with them. But New Orleans has got to address that. I mean, how are they going to handle how are they going to handle the offensive line? So there's definitely things that they need to do. For those curious, after this signing, New Orleans is about $16 million in the black. So they still have moves that they can make. They can still do just about a lot of anything. Oh, I'm sorry, I think they may be about $8 million in the black now. But moves are there to be made if they want to make them. Paul says, suppose that the best player on the board is a quarterback. Do they take him and hurt Derek Carr's feelings? Absolutely. Best player available. That should be what any good team is drafting. Best player available. What do you think about drafting on the defensive end? Absolutely. Again, if that is the best player on your board, the goal is set your roster up in a way where you don't have to pick a guy. You can let whatever fall to you. Now, if you're in love with somebody, like how Sean Payton was in love with Patrick Mahomes, well, he should have traded up to. If you believe Patrick Mahomes is going to win you 3 Super Bowls, you trade up to the number 1 pick and you give up 4 drafts. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, you make a Ricky Williams level trade. They didn't do that. So if you have that type of belief, sure. New Orleans is in a position where if they can continue to address every position of need in free agency, well, then they can draft best player available regardless of position. And that's the place you want to be at. I think if you're looking at what's best for this team, the best thing for New Orleans is the ability to do anything. And I'm not just saying that because I don't have players I would like the team to get, because there actually are multiple guys that have gone already. Hey, I would not mind if New Orleans manages this one. I'd actually be kind of happy with it. But the best position that you can truly be in is you want to go in and find a way to have to or not have to draft a position. Like if you have to draft a left tackle, but the main left tackles you wanted are gone, you then have to settle for something that, well, isn't what you wanted, right? So if you're New Orleans sitting at pick 14, there are a lot of options available to you. And then you have to decide what works for you. You can trade back if you want to acquire more picks. For example, you have pick number 14. It's not unreasonable at all to get a first round pick from a team next year and a second round pick this year, as well as like maybe a fourth or a third for that pick. That is literally a very reasonable trade. Gives you a second round pick and then gives you collateral for next year as well. That's the type of trade that maybe I would make. Not everybody else would make that type of a trade. But again, just giving examples, right? New Orleans wants to set themselves up to have options in the NFL draft where they do not have to be pigeonholed into a decision like we've got to take a quarterback, because you've seen what happens when teams do that. You know, the Mitch Trubisky's, sorry, young, just you end up in a position where it can hurt you more than it can help you. And that way, if somebody is available, like Talisi Fuaga from Oregon State, for example, if you want to get another offensive lineman, or, Latu at edge, you can, because you've addressed every position of need through free agency. That's the best way to go about it. And good to see you, Nelly Smith. Why is no one mentioning safety? Are we that confident in Howden? Oh, we actually talked about safety, Rudy Rock. Sadly, the safety I wanted us to draft, you must have missed that episode. The safety I wanted us to sign was Geno Stone. Sadly, he ended up getting signed. But yeah, if I'm the New Orleans Saints, there's plenty of things that could continue to improve on. Safety is one that I feel like has kind of gotten lost. Now, technically, Ugo Amadi is a multi-positional depth guy. But yeah, I mean, I definitely would have liked a safety there. I really, really would have liked another safety. But it is what it is, and we'll just go from there. So, what is Chat's thought on Chase Young? I want to get that Chase Young thoughts in as many of them we can, because this is a real big one. And I don't know, TJ, if you were able to grab some highlights, but if you're able to highlight the pieces where we already went over it, that would be fantastic. But as I'm sitting here, I'm going, hey, what can New Orleans do? Well, I think New Orleans needs to go after safety, go after offensive line still. Wouldn't mind another higher end wide receiver, but safety definitely there. But they're doing the right things. He says Peyton didn't pass up on Mahomes. Well, he did. He did. I will never forgive that man. He should have traded up. I mean, technically he didn't pass up, but he should have traded up. He was supposedly in love with that guy, and he wanted him. Yeah, well, you love him so much, you should have taken him. Really annoys me. Robert Bro, good to see you. Good to see him. I didn't like the Chase Young signing. Personally, I feel like $13 million is too much for a guy that isn't even a starter. Well, I can understand that argument. And again, let's be fair. And when I mean be fair, let's be analytical. Let's talk about contracts for various positions and where he is in terms of yearly average, specifically for defensive ends. Well, we can include edge in that, I guess. It depends on how we kind of want to play that. If you include all edge players, though, he's way down the list. Now, when I say all edge players, we're including guys who maybe are an outside linebacker and a 2-point stance who pass rushes. But $13 million a year as a yearly average would place him somewhere around the 19th highest played player, 18th by year. It's not bad. Now, by numbers, just going by numbers, that would seem to indicate a starter. Just it would seem to indicate maybe a lower end starter. But you're basically paying for potential. You're paying for potential. The potential that he pops off and could be a 10-sack guy. This is a guy who's had multiple 7.5-sack seasons, but never hit that 10-sack mark. And here are all the players, edge rushers, etc., who are making more. It's actually more than 19. But here are those by yearly average making more than $13 million a year. Nick Bosa, Brian Burns, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Montez Sweat. We'll all agree those five are clearly better, and those are all making double what Chase Young is. But then after that, you got Danielle Hunter, Josh Allen, who did a 1-year, $24 million deal, Rashawn Gary, Max Crosby, Bradley Chubb. So there's 10 so far. Let's keep going. Leonard Williams, Trey Hendrickson, Joey Bosa, Von Miller. Can't believe Von Miller's still at this age. Khalil Mack, now it's 15. Jonathan Greenard, who did a 4-year, 76, that's 19 a year. But Harold Landry, he's still around. Draymond Jones, Bryce Huff, Alex Highsmith. We're at 20 folks so far. Eric Armstead, Zach Allen, Hassan Reddick, Matt Milano, Randy Gregory, 25. Robert Quinn, Cameron Jordan, Jonathan Franklin Myers, Matt Judon, Josh Sweat, Marcus Lawrence, then Carl Granderson right at $13 million. So that is actually number 32, tied with Carl Granderson by yearly average. By yearly average for edge rushers, he's the 32nd highest paid player if the season were to start right now. I don't think it's a bad deal. If it was like a 5-year deal, I would probably have more issues. But yeah, there you have it. You got Carl Granderson, Preston Smith, Chase Young, all $13 million a year. $13 million a year. So you've got a young player who is young, pun intended, who's 24 years old. And he's about to turn 25. We'll see how it goes. Clutch Sports Group is his agent, by the way. Random knowledge. But yeah, 1-year deal that makes him a player that technically isn't even starter pay, which is kind of really blows our minds, I think, collectively, how much these guys are getting paid. But like for reference, Bradley Chubb, I'm not even being a hater. Bradley Chubb's making $22 million a year. Well, I feel like that number's a little high. I mean, no offense. No offense. Bradley Chubb, $22 million a year? Imagine having Nick Bosa for $34 million a year. Woof. It's pricey. And then obviously New York just paid big for Brian Burns, gave him that 5-year extension, $28.2 million a year. So if Chase Young plays and gets, in my opinion, if Chase Young gets a minimum of 7 sacks, which would be the 3rd time that he's done it in his career, New Orleans won. If he can't do that, New Orleans gambled and they didn't lose, but they didn't win. It's a neutral. But if he can get 7 sacks for this team, I think they won. And we'll see what they do moving into next offseason based on that. $34 million for Defensive Player of the Year is money well spent. I mean, it's money well spent if you can win a Super Bowl. But that's always the thing. Can you win a Super Bowl? Ain't happened yet. Ain't happened yet. It's like buying Apple stock right now, low risk. Hey, if you got Apple stock money, I got kids. Feed them. I got kids. Come feed them. All right. If he did well, could they franchise him if they didn't want to lose him again? You could franchise him, but remember, franchise tags are generally, depending on what type of tag you're doing, taking like the top 10 salaries and turning those top 10 salaries into one singular contract, like you're taking the average And that would be a little pricey. So we're just talking about the numbers of where everything was. Let's see. Where's that one? I don't have that one on the screen. That would be, see if we can math this out, like just eyeball math it. Top 10 based on, if they go by edge, do they consider all edge contracts or just defensive ends? If they do just defensive ends, that would put his new franchise tag around 18 million, 19 million. I mean, it'd be a pay upgrade. Let's see, franchise tag amount. I'm going to Google this one because I don't know the number. Yeah. Okay, so the franchise tag amount this year for a defensive end is 19.7 million. So if they franchise tagged him, I'm going to assume that's going to have gone up because of guys like Brian Burns. If they were to franchise tag him next year, probably 20 to 22 million. You'd want to get a contract at that point. So could you franchise tag him? Absolutely. But a franchise tag would almost double the money that he made this year. You want to find a long-term deal. But if he turns into a 10-sack guy, you do what you got to do, right? You do what you got to do. Who you get stocks for? Nelly, I get groceries. Groceries costing me an arm and a leg, man. Economy's crazy. Economy's crazy. By the way, if y'all appreciate the show, I appreciate y'all. PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, if y'all want to donate. This is the first time I think we've mentioned our PayPal, Venmo, Cash App in probably a month. So if y'all want to help out, links are in the chat. Every bit helps. Did Calais Campbell retire yet, or is he waiting for his 86th birthday? Great question. He was told, he made it pretty adamant that he was going to retire. But he might come back. He might come back. He was very emotional the last Falcons game about that being it. But we'll see. Puzzle pieces sitting on the board waiting to be revealed. Nelly over here speaking cryptically. Love it. Good to see you, Nelly. Been a while. Elite pass rushers are like elite quarterbacks. They don't grow on trees. Absolutely agree. I agree with that statement. Saying better win Super Bowls, you're always going to be questioned. That's just a fact. You're always going to be questioned unless you win a Super Bowl. Unless you win a Super Bowl, you're going to be questioned. So get to win a Super Bowls. Get to winning Super Bowls. Also, brings up the debate, who's more valuable, TJ Watt or Nick Bosa? TJ Watt, who has had a 20-sack season, which is insane to me. Bosa's had, one 18-sack season? Who's more valuable? I don't know. Great questions to be had for all. Spectrum talk, the internet or pass rushers? Both. You say TJ Watt? That's a good debate. Not really for us because we don't have either one of them, but I think TJ Watt is obviously more versatile just based on the nature of how he's played in Pittsburgh. TJ Watt has also been Defensive Player of the Year only once, whereas somehow Nick Bosa's been technically, I mean, do you count Defensive Rookie of the Year as Defensive Player of the Year? Because technically they are two different things, but he's been Defensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. Whereas TJ Watt has been Defensive Player of the Year once, but he's been top 3 in Defensive Player of the Year voting 4 times. Like, he was Defensive Player of the Year second in voting this most recent year. He was first in 2021. He was second in 2020 and third in 2019. You know, I know that's first loser or whatever. Myles Garrett got it this most recent year. And I'm not saying that Myles Garrett didn't deserve it. Myles Garrett had a fantastic season. But, yeah, TJ Watt's, they're both special. Both special. I mean, because if I had to pick who I'd rather have, Myles Garrett or TJ Watt, I would personally rather have Garrett because I feel like he's a better complete player. But it depends on what you value. If you value sacks, well, TJ Watt, there might not be a more valuable player in the NFL right now than TJ Watt. He might be the most valuable player in the entire league right now, TJ Watt. Defensive Player of the Year is always a tough one. Always a tough one. Yeah, great names recently here that have never won. Like, think about it. Hassan Reddick. He's never won Defensive Player of the Year, but that dude popped off, what, 4 straight Tim Sack seasons. And what's crazy about Hassan Reddick doing it, he's done it with 3 different teams. He did it with Arizona, then went and did it with Carolina, and then has done it with Philly 2 straight years. Like, that's how you know a guy is good. The great Aaron Donald hung it up. Look, Aaron Donald is the best 3 tech I've ever seen, period, bar none. It all wraps up eventually for somebody. It all wraps up at some point. Aaron Donald, I wish he didn't retire, but Aaron Donald is the most dominant player at that 3 tech that I've ever seen. Insane. Defensive Player of the Year, by the way, 4 times. 4 times. First team All-Pro 8 times. Dude, still, I think that if he wanted to, Aaron Donald could probably still have a good 4 seasons in him. A good 3 seasons, maybe. Where he still was getting 6, 7 sacks a year. But, when your time's done. One of the worst things I think that ever happened, the fact that man didn't get to the NFL until he was 23 years old. You look at a lot of like young guys who get into the league. They can get in the league as 21. Cameron Jordan, when he joined the Saints, he was 22. But here we go. Crazy stat. Cameron Jordan has 117 and a half sacks. Aaron Donald, 111. Now, obviously, Cam's had a career that's like 3 years longer. But, yeah, crazy stats. I think Cameron Jordan deserves to go into the Hall of Fame. I know not everybody will agree with that, but I think Cameron Jordan deserves to go in the Hall of Fame. 8-time Pro Bowler, Hall of Fame 2010s team, first team All-Pro once, but second team All-Pro twice, was 4th in Defensive Player of the Year voting back in 2017. I think that man needs to go in the Hall of Fame. That's just me. I think he needs to go in the Hall of Fame. So, all right, y'all. That's he is a Hall of Famer to me. And I will give Tampa Bay their credit. Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer too. He is. Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer. Frank Gore is a Hall of Famer. Just because you're a Hall of Famer don't mean you're the best player to ever do it, but there's something special about a guy that can do it for a long time and do it well. If Mike Evans gets 6 touchdowns this year, he'll have 100 in his career. There are not many receivers in NFL history that have 100 touchdowns. I know that we're not really rivals with, pisses some people off, but I'm sorry. If you are listening, no, you're not a real rival with us. I apologize. But there are not a lot of guys who have 100 receiving touchdowns in NFL history. There are not. In fact, let me give you the number of how many have it. There are 10. 10 ever. 10 in the history of the NFL. 10 with 100 or more receiving touchdowns. Devontae Adams is at 95. Mike Evans is at 94. Jimmy Graham's at 89. Mike Evans gets 6 more, hits 100. He'll be tied with 9th all time. That's pretty damn impressive, y'all. Pretty damn impressive. It's like he has that, 10 years of 1,000 yards. It's kind of like Cam also has one of those underrated, in my opinion, NFL records. Cameron Jordan's record was a little bit different, but from 2012 to 2022, he had 7.5 sacks or more every single year. That is an NFL record. It's an NFL record. Now, it's not as flashy as some because he didn't have like a 20 sack season in there, but the man literally, it still blows my mind, literally had an 11-year stretch with 7.5 sacks or more. NFL record. Mike Evans doing similar stuff. That's wild. And at no point was Cameron Jordan like ever better than J.J. Watt or anything. But there's definitely something to being a guy that's really, really good for a long time, even if you're never the best player at any given time. You know what I mean? Yeah, Rainey, 11 years. I'll write them all for you. 2012, 8 sacks. 2013, 12 and a half. 2014, 7.5. 2015, 10. 2016, 7 and a half. 2017, 13. 2018, 12. 2019, 15 and a half. And I argue this year, that year he was robbed of an all-pro. 2020, 7 and a half. 2021, 12 and a half. 2022, 8 and a half. 11 straight years of 7.5 sacks or more. There's just something about being consistently great. You might never be the best, because there's not a single year where I would say Cameron Jordan was the best pass rusher. We talk about just being one of the best players, period. Yeah. He's one of the best defensive ends I've ever seen, especially in terms of being a complete player. So, especially being a complete player. Is Jimmy Graham done? I mean, Jimmy Graham, you got to remember, Jimmy Graham came in last year and hadn't played in a year. So, Jimmy Graham's probably done. I would still bring Jimmy Graham back if you actually used him in the red zone. He did have 4 touchdowns last year. But, yeah, Jimmy Graham's probably done. Jimmy Graham's probably done. Like, for real done. He already said his goodbyes to New Orleans after the season ended. So. Oh, man. Good conversations. Good conversations. I like it when y'all roll up the good conversations. Reggie Wayne put up Hall of Fame numbers as a number 2 mainly. I don't want to disrespect Reggie Wayne like that, because he definitely played a number 1 role. But I always have said that as good as Reggie Wayne was, because he was, I always feel like people forget how good Marvin Harrison was. And it always shocks me that Marvin Harrison has become like this forgotten wide receiver. Now, I guess I can't really say forgotten. He did make it into the Hall of Fame. But like when people say great Colts wide receiver, the first name that comes out of almost everybody's mouth is Reggie Wayne. As if Marvin Harrison, in my opinion, wasn't better. Shout out Marvin Harrison Jr. Become a saint. Hey, who says no? Who says no? New Orleans. Get Marvin Harrison Jr. But yeah, Marvin Harrison, insanely good. Yeah, Chase Young's having a neck procedure, hit me, but this was known. It is to repair a stinger that he actually played through the entirety of last year. He got it last preseason and played through it all the way through the Super Bowl. So, you think Honey Badger's a Hall of Famer? I don't. No. I do think that he's a team great, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's really good, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Yeah. Marvin Harrison is what a perfect career looks like for Olave. I could only wish. I could only wish. Marvin Harrison and Chris Carter, the quiet 2 of the top 5. Chris Carter ain't quiet now, but he might have been back in y'all's day. I don't know. You do think Honey Badger's a Hall of Famer? I think that Honey Badger is a Kansas City Chiefs Hall of Famer. And maybe Arizona. But no, I don't think he makes it into the Hall. Who knows, though? He's still playing with the Saints. And he's got 33 career interceptions. If he can play a couple more years, maybe get up that number up to 40 interceptions total. Maybe if he can get another Pro Bowl nod, maybe. But here's the thing. He's made 3 All-Pros, but he's only made 3 Pro Bowls. He's never been Defensive Player of the Year, no Defensive Rookie of the Year. And I just don't know if that's enough to get him in. Guess we'll see. You feel Harrison was better, but I think he gets downgraded because the rules were changed because he would get shut down in the playoffs by physicalness of the Patriots. So I'll admit that going Marvin Harrison is getting a little bit before my time. However, out of curiosity, I will look up his playoff stats just because I'm curious postseason stats. How did he do in the postseason? I specifically want all of your postseason games, Mr. Marvin Harrison. Okay, that's not your postseason. Where are your postseason? All right, let's see how he did. Postseason, his career postseason, he only had one game with over 100 yards receiving. 16 games, only one game with over 100 yards receiving. I'll admit, that's surprising. 16 games, only 2 touchdowns. All right, maybe you have an argument there. I was not old enough to have film studied Marvin Harrison in the playoffs. Just saying, 16 games in the playoffs? 16 games in the playoffs? You had 2 touchdowns? 2? Like, dose. His catch percentage in the playoffs, 49%. And this is a guy that I am openly saying, in my opinion, best Colts receiver of all time. But I will admit, those numbers are a little shocking to me. Numbers are very shocking to me. Michael Thomas has played in 7 playoff games, has 4 touchdowns, 200-yard games, and caught 67% of the passes thrown his way. Just saying, for whatever reason, I guess Marvin Harrison wasn't that guy in the playoffs. But I don't know about any of that, man. That's different team, different era. But I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. Can't wait to do a little bit more. If any of y'all can help out with highlighting some of that Chase Young stuff, maybe we'll put out a little short film study on it. Who dat? God bless. Thank you so much for watching the show. Appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for those who support the channel, support me and my family. Y'all are amazing. Can't wait to see what the New Orleans Saints are going to do for the draft. And we'll see you on the next one. Deuces.
An even better outro than the intro.